Chapter 1. The Citadel.
I don't want to go,
Nick said stubbornly.
Why can't I stay here?
David Anderson didn't have any children of his own, and had the matter been left to him, the ex-Navy officer would have ordered the teenager out of the apartment, with possibly unpleasant results. Fortunately, the woman he loved knew how to deal with such situations. Carly was in good shape for a woman in her 40s, or 30s for that matter. As she smiled, tiny creases appeared around her eyes.
You can't stay here because David and I may want you to tell the council what happened on the day Grayson invaded the Grissom Academy. It's important to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again.
Nick had been shot in the stomach during the attack and sent to the Citadel for advanced medical treatment, so he knew about Grayson firsthand. Nick, with shoulder-length black hair and a relatively small frame for a boy his age, looked hopeful.
Can I go to the cube on the way back?
Sure,
Carly replied.
but only for an hour. Come on, let's go.
A crisis had been averted, and Anderson was grateful. As they left the apartment, the door locked behind them. An elevator took them down to the first floor and out into the hectic crush of the lower wards. A monorail loomed overhead. The pedways were crowded with individuals of every species, and the streets were jammed with ground vehicles. All of which was normal for the huge, star-shaped space station that served as the cultural, financial, and political hub of the galaxy. Anderson had been an admiral and the Alliance's representative to the Citadel Council, so he had spent a lot of time aboard the habitat. Everything was organized around a central ring. It was 10 kilometers across, and the Citadel's 40-kilometer-long fingers pointed from it to the stars beyond. The total population of the station was said to be in excess of 13 million sentients, none of whom had played a role in creating the complex structure. The Asari had discovered the station 2,700 years earlier, while exploring the vast network of mass relays put in place by a spacefaring species known as the Protheans. Having established a base on the Citadel, the Asari learned how to create mass effect fields, and made use of them to explore the galaxy. When the Solarians found the space station a few decades later, the two races agreed to form the Citadel Council for the purpose of settling disputes. And, as more species began to travel the stars, they had little choice but to follow the dictates of the technologically advanced Council races. Humans were relative newcomers, and had only recently been granted a seat on the Citadel Council. For many years, it had been assumed that the Protheans were responsible for creating the Citadel. But more recently, it had been learned that the real architects were a mysterious race of sentient starships called the Reapers, who conceived of the space station as a trap and were responsible for annihilating all organic sentience every 50,000 years or so. And even though Reapers were trapped in dark space, there was evidence that they could reach out and control their servants from light years away. And that, Anderson believed, was a continuing threat, one the Council should deal with immediately. The problem being that day-to-day interspecies rivalries often got in the way of the big picture. That was just one of the reasons why it had been so difficult for Anderson and Kali to get the Council to look beyond historical grievances to the greater threat represented by the Reapers. Anderson and Kali were certain that the Reapers had been in at least partial control of Grayson when he invaded the Grissom Academy, but they were still struggling to convince certain members of the Council. And that had everything to do with the presentation they planned to give. Hopefully, if they were successful, the Council would agree to unify behind an effort to counter the danger that threatened them all. Otherwise, the Reapers would do what they had done before: wipe the galaxy clean of sentient life. As Anderson led the others aboard a public shuttle, he was reminded of the fact that the Reapers had created the Citadel as bait for a high-tech trap. One that had been sprung so successfully that now, 2 years later, some of the damage the sentient machines had caused was still being repaired. The vehicle came to life as Anderson settled himself behind the controls. The contragravity speeder was powered by a mass effect field and would carry them from the lower wards to the vicinity of the Presidium, where the Council's offices were located. Kali was sitting next to him, and Nick was in the back, fiddling with his Omni tool. The device consisted of an orange hologram that was superimposed over the teenager's right arm. It could be used for hacking computers, repairing electronic devices, and playing games. And that's what Nick was doing, as Anderson guided the shuttle through a maze of streets under graceful pedways and into the flow of traffic that ran like a river between a pair of high-rise cliffs. 10 minutes later, the shuttle pulled into a rapid transit platform where they disembarked. A short, tubby Volus pushed his way forward to claim the speedster for himself. He was dressed in an environment suit, and most of his face was hidden by a breathing mask.
Make way, Earth Clan. I don't have all day.
They were accustomed to the often rude manner in which the Citadel's citizens interacted with each other, and weren't surprised by the stranger's contentious tone. The Volus were closely allied with the raptor-like Turians, many of whom still felt a degree of animosity towards humans, resulting from the First Contact War. And that was just one of the problems which prevented the races from trusting each other. As Anderson, Callie, and Nick walked toward a bank of elevators, they passed a pair of beautiful Asari. The species were asexual, but to Anderson's eye, they looked like human females, even if their skin had a bluish tint. Rather than hair, waves of sculpted skin could be seen on the backs of their heads, and they were very shapely.
You can put your eyeballs back in your head now.
Callie commented as they entered the elevator.
No wonder the Asari get along without men. Maybe I could too.
Anderson grinned.
Just looking, that's all. I'm partial to blondes.
Callie made a face as the elevator started upward, and the Solarian standing in front of them lost his briefcase. It had been tucked under his arm, but suddenly slipped out and landed on the floor. Like all of his kind, the Solarian's head was narrow and crowned with two horn-like appendages. As he bent to retrieve the object, it scooted away from him.
Nick!
Callie said crossly.
Stop that! Give him the case and apologize.
The teen looked as if he might object, saw the expression on Callie's face, and apparently thought better of it. Having removed the folder from the floor, he gave it back to its owner and mumbled,
Sorry.
The Solarian had seen biotic pranks before and wasn't amused.
You have a talent.
He snapped.
Use it wisely.
Nick was one of the rare individuals who could manipulate the gravity-like force found in all of the otherwise empty spaces of the universe. The boy had been working to refine his biotic skills of late, and the subtle combination of energies required to dislodge the briefcase and then move it around was quite impressive. It was also annoying, and made Anderson frown. Fortunately for Nick, Callie was more patient. Maybe too patient. The elevator doors opened smoothly, and the passengers spilled out into a lobby that opened onto the Presidium. In marked contrast to the densely packed wards, it was almost entirely open. There were artificial clouds in the blue sky. Sunlight streamed down from above, and as Anderson accompanied the others out onto a curving walkway, he could feel a light breeze touch his neck. The parklight area was home to a lake, clusters of trees, and a large expanse of well-manicured grass. People representing various races were constantly coming and going. Some appeared to be in a hurry, while others strolled along or sat on benches. Anderson's pace was more purposeful, as he led the others toward the Citadel Tower, located at the very center of the massive space station. It was difficult to appreciate the structure by looking straight up at it, but Anderson knew it could be seen from many kilometers away, and was the most important landmark on the Citadel. The council chambers were positioned toward the top of the spire, and it wouldn't pay to be late, so Anderson set a brisk pace. The council's agenda typically remained in flux right up until the beginning of each meeting, so Anderson had no way to know if their presentation would be first, last, or somewhere in between. But before the threesome could enter the tower, it was necessary to check in with the Citadel Security Services (CSEC) kiosk located outside the main entrance. The person in charge was Turian. Bright eyes stared at Anderson from bony sockets that were surrounded by a tracery of scarlet tattoos. A flat, thin-slitted nose was flanked by hard facial plates. The officer's mouth formed an inverted V and wasn't designed to smile.
Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
My name is Anderson, Admiral David Anderson. This is Callie Sanders and Nick Donahue. We were invited to appear before the council today.
The Turian said,
One moment, please.
as he scrolled the list of names on the monitor in front of him.
Yes, here you are. Now, if you'd be so kind as to look at the scanner, we'll confirm your identity.
The device was built into the kiosk, and as Anderson looked into it, he knew that it was scanning his retinas. From there, the data would be sent to the Citadel's central computer, where it could be checked and confirmed, all in a couple of seconds. The Turian nodded.
You can proceed to the elevator, Admiral. Welcome to the Citadel Tower.
Miss Sanders, please look into the scanner.
Once all three of them had been cleared, it was time to enter the transparent elevator that would carry them up the outside of the tower to the council chamber. They were alone, and, as the platform shot upward, a broad swath of the Presidium appeared. A view so remarkable that it earned a
Wow.
from the normally taciturn Nick. The view was no accident, of course. It was meant to impress visitors, and it did. Way off in the distance, Anderson could see all of the space station's widespread arms. They were frosted with lights that glittered and faded into the hazy distance. Then the trip was over, as the elevator slowed and stopped. Doors parted and Anderson followed Callie and Nick out into the hallway. A broad staircase could be seen at the far end. As the threesome approached it, they passed between 8 honor guards, 4 to each side of the marble-lined corridor. There were 2 Turians, 2 Solarians, 2 Asari, and 2 humans, the latter having been added once humans were granted a seat on the council. An Asari in a beautifully draped floor-length gown was waiting for them at the foot of the stairs.
Good morning. My name is Jai Malani. The meeting is about to begin. You are 4th on the agenda. Please go up the stairs and follow the pathway to the right. We'll take you to a waiting room where you can watch the proceedings. Refreshments are available. Approximately 10 minutes prior to your presentation, I will come to get you.
Having thanked Milani, Anderson followed Callie up the stairs and off to the right. The waiting room was a luxurious affair, equipped with 24 seats, all facing a large screen. About half were filled. As the humans entered, the other petitioners turned to stare at them. The group included Turians, Solarians, and a human female. After satisfying their curiosity, they turned back to the screen. The threesome found 3 chairs and sat down. Nick consulted the glowing Omni tool attached to his left arm, as Callie leaned in to whisper to Anderson's ear.
They put us halfway down the agenda. Not a good sign.
Anderson knew what she meant. The council had a well-known tendency to tackle the items they believed to be most important first, and their number 1 priority quickly became clear as the huge wall screen came to life and a wide shot of the council chamber appeared. Viewed from the back of the huge amphitheater, one could see that all of the spectator seats were filled, signaling that something of interest to a significant number of people was up for discussion. There was a raised platform off to the left where the council members were seated. The petitioner's stage was located directly across from them, with a male quarian ready to speak. The quarians were a nomadic race who were typically a bit smaller than the average human. As was typical for his kind, the petitioner was dressed in a motley collection of clothing held together by a variety of straps and metal fasteners. His face was obscured by a reflective visor and breathing apparatus. The essence of the quarian's request became evident once he was given permission to speak.
My name is Fothar Vas Minor. I appear before you as a duly authorized representative of the Quarian fleet.
Duly authorized scum is more like it.
One of the Turians seated in the waiting room growled. And Anderson knew why. It was the Quarians who had created the artificial intelligences known as the Geth 300 years earlier. Later, in the wake of the hard-fought Geth rebellion, the Quarians had been forced to take refuge on a collection of starships called the Migrant Fleet, and because of that history, other races looked down on the nomads. The audience seated in the council chamber uttered a chorus of boos, which garnered a stern warning from the human master-at-arms. Her voice boomed over the PA system.
There will be order. My soldiers will clear this room if necessary.
The noise died away, and the Asari council member spoke. She was in the matriarch stage of a very long life, and known for her reasonable nature. Her bluish skin seemed to glow as if lit from within.
Please accept our apologies, Representative Maynard. You may proceed.
The Quarian delivered a half-bow.
Thank you. The matter I wish to put before you is simple. While it's true that my race unintentionally loosed the Geth menace on the galaxy, it's also true that we have paid for that mistake and continue to do so. The Council may recall that many years ago, in the wake of the Geth rebellion, we were ordered to close our office in the Presidium, and we understand why. But a great deal has changed since then, and we believe the time has come for a new relationship. That is why I come before the Council seeking permission to reopen a Quarian embassy on the Citadel. After all, even the Batarians have such an office in the Presidium, so why should the Migrant Fleet be excluded?
That brought a roar of opposition from the crowd, and, true to her word, the Master-at-Arms sent troops in to clear the amphitheater. That took 10 minutes, and the Quarian had to stand and wait until the process was completed. Then a debate began in earnest, and soon it became clear that the Council was split. The Solarian and human members were in favor of the proposal, while the others were opposed. After 15 minutes of give and take, it was the Asari who offered a compromise.
I oppose the concept of reopening a Quarian embassy because it implies the existence of a cohesive government, and Representative Maynard has yet to prove that such an organization actually exists. However, that being said, he has a point. I believe that the creation of formal linkage through which the Quarian fleet can communicate to the Council would be a positive development. So rather than an embassy, I suggest that we authorize a Quarian consulate. Then, when and if conditions warrant, that presence can be elevated to the status of a full-scale embassy.
Both the Solarian and the human agreed to the suggestion, leaving the Turian to scowl powerlessly as Minar expressed his thanks. The There would be no embassy, but a step had been taken, and the fleet would be pleased. The next hour passed slowly for Anderson, Kali, and Nick, but finally, after 3 additional presentations, the Asari named Milani came to fetch them.